Hello everyone, welcome back to my vlog. Today we'll be shooting part 2 of the bike build, and I'll be showing you the cassette and a few other components that I'll be assembling. But before I do that, I'll just do a quick view of the components that I've laid out on the table with a brief description of what they are and what they are for, in case you missed the first part 1. Okay, so here we have, I'll just step back a little bit so you can have a good look at what I've laid out here. So we have all the sprockets laid out, which I'll explain to you as I assemble them. Sprocket lock ring tool, torque wrench in the background, and a bit of grease, and the wheel, obviously the most important part, on a stand that I made quite a few years ago when I rebuilt my old Classic. I used the stand to support the wheels whilst I cleaned the rims, and my other aluminium rims, I needed to polish them. So this was a perfect stand, which I think is going to be perfect for the forming of the rear hub assembly. So let's let's move on. Okay, so let's start by putting in the spacer, the rearmost spacer. I've explained in my part 1 video the reason behind the requirement of the spacer, and so we won't go into too much detail on this video, except to say that the way that it's been machined is to give me the best support possible for the rear sprockets. Okay, I do not use any grease on the hub. I don't feel it to be necessary, particularly in my case. I've got an aluminium hub, and the spacers they're not metal. They are a form of polymer, and therefore I think that is fine. Let's turn the hub so that the wide groove faces the top, so it'll be easier to assemble all the sprockets. Whilst you're on the subject of this hub, this is an 11-speed hub, and I've had to rebuild this hub as the outer bearing seized up. A hub that's hardly been used, a bike that hardly gets used in the wet, yet the bearing seized up. So I've replaced both bearings with NTN bearings, and the outer bearing having the double lip seal, which hopefully that is going to prevent the ingress of any water or any other foreign matter, and therefore the bearing lasts longer. The inner bearing, although sealed, I've used contactless seal because the inner bearing is not exposed to dirt or water or anything of that like. Therefore the reduction in friction, although you probably won't feel it, the theory makes sense. Okay, so let's move on. This is the first, these are the first 3 sprockets. Just to give you an idea, the biggest one is a 34, the second is a 30, and then the third is a 27. So we look for the wide indentation, the wide groove on the hub, and the matching section that goes in there. You can only put this one way, it cannot go any other way. If you try to put it the wrong way around, for argument's sake, it just wouldn't fit. So it can only go one way. So there we go. That will just slide that back. Now we move on to the next one. Now you'll find that this already has a spacer, which what it does is it eliminates the need to have another one of these spacers between the sprockets. So the next sprocket is a 25. So this is the next sprocket. Again, we look for the wide section there, and again, as I said before, you cannot, the sprockets will not go in the wrong way around. They can only go in one way, and therefore you will not make a mistake. Okay, now before the next sprocket is fitted, we now need to insert the next spacer, which is designed for 11 speed. Now both road bike and mountain bike use exactly the same thickness sprockets and the same thickness spacers on the 11 speed. Right, so that one is in. Now we move on to the next sprocket, which is now a 23. Again, we look for the matching indentation, matching lock, spline, whatever you want to call it, and there it goes. We then again insert. Now the spacer, it makes no difference how you put the spacer, which way you face the outside, which way you face the inside, it'll always fit. As long as you can slide it over, there's no problem. So the next sprocket to go in is the 21 tooth. That now goes in. We again push another spacer against it before installing the next sprocket. The next sprocket is a 19, and once that is inserted, we now back to a ring. There are ways of doing this quicker, but I think for the purpose of this video and to give you a full explanation of how it all works, I've decided to do it this way. So 19, now we proceed with our 17 sprocket. I keep saying socket, not really sure why. Once that's inserted, we now insert a ring, again a spacer ring, and we move on to the 15 tooth sprocket next. That's now in, and here is the spacer that I made up. Well, I didn't make the spacer, I thinned it down to the correct thickness of 2.15 for the 11 speed. And what as discussed in the first part, so that'll be next. now here is the sprocket that I purchased as discussed in the first part, which is a 14 tooth sprocket. And this sprocket, I'm installing this between the 13 and 15, obviously being a 14. The reason behind it is to give me more friendly ratios. So when I ride on my big chain ring, the 50 tooth, I can ride with a straighter chain line, and also I have more friendly ratios, bearing in mind I can no longer deliver the power that I used to. So the 14 goes in. Now the eagle-eyed viewers will note that the space in there is quite small. However, once I push this 13 socket in there, it does grip. And once I torque up the lock, once I torque the lock ring, which fits in there, as discussed in the first video, it will squeeze it, and it'll bite sufficiently on there for the sprocket not to spin, not to get damaged. So I'm not worried about it. Being a 13.2 and the power that I develop, it's not going to do anything. So that will go in there. There we go. That's locked in there, and so ready for the lock ring. This is the other bit that I have machined using a very simple method, of which I will do a video on at some point, as I've had a request to do a video on how I did this, and also how I machined the spaces, the inner space in particular, with all the little grooves. Okay, so yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just sit that on there. This is the correct spanner for the lock ring, for this type of lock ring, and that's where I will put my torque wrench on. So in this case here, I will now take a little bit of grease, a little bit I said, and I go in, and I will put the grease on these threads. The reason behind it is to stop. It depends on how long it's going to be before you remove the lock ring again, but in any event, it is better to put grease on here, and just to keep any form of corrosion, seizure from happening, so that the next time you need to remove it, you are not dealing with an impossible case. And I think that is enough. I can put this little bit left over in there. Okay, the reason behind me not applying too much grease It's quite simple. When you have all this grease not serving any purpose, okay, so as I'm sure you can see, I made sure that the thread's engaged correctly, and now I'm turning it in by hand until it has now reached home. That is now spot on. You'll note that the cassette is now nice and solid, and I shall now get my torque wrench and torque it to 45 Newton meters. I have already set the torque wrench to 45 Newton meters, so that's all ready to go. Apply force gently, make sure that the socket remains straight with the axle, so as to prevent any side twisting. As you can see, now you will recall that only a little bit of engagement appeared earlier, but have you seen how much I've been able to turn this? And what that means is that it is pushing the sockets together and it is getting a good grip. This sprocket is getting a good grip on the hub itself. Okay, I'm going to have to hold this wheel. There we go. There we go. That is now torqued to 45 Newton meters. There is no chance of that coming off. Of that I'm certain. What we have here is, I know some people just very lightly tighten the lock ring, but I'll tell you what happens when you do not tighten the lock ring to the specified torque. What happens is that there isn't enough friction between the sprockets and the spacers, and you will find that people seem to think, oh, the lock ring will tighten up when you're cycling. No, it doesn't, because the sprocket does not move. The sprocket is engaged in a spline, so the sprocket does not move. So you cannot tighten the lock ring. Therefore, in other words, when you're cycling, this is not a free wheel. A free wheel tightens itself with you cycling, and the more power you put through it, the more the threads will tighten up. This is a free hub. This depends on this external lock ring to keep everything together. Therefore, it is a myth to think, and not everyone thinks this, I understand that, but it is a myth to think that any lock ring will tighten up when you're cycling. So some people simply apply a little bit of pressure. Oh, that's good enough, that's fine. It's not. Torque it to the manufacturer's specification. Okay, if you do not own a torque wrench, I believe it's even worth the trouble of going to a bicycle shop, or someone you know, a friend, garage, anyone, to ask them rather, to torque it up for you, because it'll pay dividends. The wear on the hub will reduce, sprockets will stay nice and tight, your shifting will improve. It's just better all around. So my personal opinion, personal suggestion is that make sure you torque your lock ring, irrespective of what type of lock ring you've got. Okay, so that is now assembled, that's now installed, that's the lock ring, that's the cassette done, lock ring done. The lock ring is, as discussed before, the reason why I went to this lock ring on part 1, but what I will show you is let me just get the camera quickly, and I will bring it a little closer, and I will show you, as soon as the camera decides to focus, I will show you what it looks like, the type of finish. It's very smooth. You can see how much space, how much further in the sprocket is gone from the edge of the nut that will sit up against your frame set. So that's it, that's the job done. The rear, let's see if I can get to the rear to show you what the rear is like. The rear is also sitting nicely. Obviously the sprocket is moved away from the spokes a little bit. Now, as mentioned before, this cassette is designed for mountain bike, for use with 10-speed hubs, or even 11-speed hubs. 11-speed hub on mountain bike is the same size hub as 10-speed on road bikes. However, if Shimano, like the 1132 for instance, if Shimano, you'll see that Shimano's rear sprocket is straight and you're running a little closer to the spokes than ideal. in my case, this has worked out really well, and you can see it's all spinning nicely. Hub sounds great. Therefore, I think that's job done for now. Okay, we shall move on to the next job. All I need to do now is prep it. To finish off this video, I've decided to take a close-up with the frame mounted on the wheel so that you can see how much clearance we've got between the small sprocket and the frame set, and also between the rear sprocket and the spokes. I think you can just see the spokes where my finger is, and the sprocket. As you can see, there's quite a considerable amount of space there, which is perfect. This has all worked out well. Let me try and take a view from the top so you can get a better look. There you go. Brilliant. The rear is not so easy to, but if you look carefully, I think you can see how the spacer that I manufactured or modified fits in beautifully. It really does. Whilst we're here, I wanted to show you another little trick. Now, iron tubes, mat, or threadless up here. However, these tubes, they tend to rattle a little bit on the rim when you're riding along. And I wanted to show you, see, with a bit of heat shrink placed over the valves, inserted into the hole in the rim, shrunk, and actually it works beautifully. There's no movement and there's no rattle. It really is an excellent addition, modification that you can do to prevent those nasty rattles that you get from loose tube valves on your rims. Okay, I hope that helps, as I'm going to conclude this video now, and until the next time, bye.